Welcome to a road trip unlike any other. Over the coming months, we're going to travel together across all 50 states, uncovering the supernatural stories that lurk in the shadows of American history. Stories that don't make the headlines. Tales that locals whisper about but outsiders never hear. My name is Michael, and this is State of the Supernatural. Each episode will explore 3 supernatural encounters from a single state. Not the famous ones you've heard a dozen times before, but the lesser known stories that are somehow even more unsettling because they've remained hidden for so long. And where better to begin than the heart of it all? Ohio, the Buckeye State. Some call it the most paranormally active state in America, and after researching what we're about to discuss, I'm starting to understand why. But before we dive in, if you're into supernatural stories, mysterious encounters, and the unexplained, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We've got 49 more states to explore, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming. Give this video a like if you're ready to discover the dark side of America state by state. Now, let's talk about Ohio. Our first story takes us to the woods of Vermillion, Ohio, where the ruins of what locals call Gore Orphanage have terrified visitors for over a century. But here's the thing, there was never actually an orphanage on this land. So, why do people still hear children screaming in the night? The property we know as Gore Orphanage was actually the Swift Mansion, built in the 1840s by a farmer named Nicholas Wilbur. It was later sold to the Gore family in the 1900s, that's where the name comes from, but the legend that grew around this place is far more sinister than its actual history. And that's what makes it fascinating, because sometimes the stories people tell reveal truths that are left out of the history books. In the 1960s, teenagers started spreading tales about an orphanage that once stood in these woods. According to the legend, a fire broke out in the middle of the night, and the cruel headmaster locked the doors, trapping dozens of children inside. They say you can still hear the children screaming, crying for the help that never came. Visitors reported seeing small handprints on their car windows, hearing the patter of little feet running through the leaves, and feeling small hands tugging at their clothes. Now here's where it gets interesting. While there never was an orphanage at that exact location, there was an orphanage nearby. The Light of Hope Orphanage operated in the area in the late 1800s, and while there's no record of a catastrophic fire, several children did die there under mysterious circumstances. The facility was eventually shut down amid rumors of abuse and neglect. In 1923, tragedy did strike near this location. A train derailed not far from the property, killing several people, including children. Some researchers believed the residual energy from the disaster may have attached itself to the already unsettling ruins. But let me tell you about something that happened more recently. In 2003, a group of paranormal investigators from Cleveland decided to spend the night at Gore Orphanage Road. They brought recording equipment, cameras, the works. The leader of the group, named Marcus, had a particularly chilling account. Around 2:47 a.m., all of their lighting and camera equipment shut off simultaneously. No explanation. Fresh batteries. Everything checked before they started. Everything just dead. They were plunged into complete darkness in the middle of the woods. That's when they heard it. Singing. A child's voice, singing a lullaby that Marcus said he recognized from his own childhood, All the Pretty Little Horses. But here's the part that terrified them the most. The voice was moving. It started distant somewhere deep in the woods, then moved closer and closer, circling their position. Marcus said they could hear footsteps in the leaves, keeping time with the melody. His friend Sarah shone her flashlight toward the sound, and for just a moment, she swears she saw a small figure in a white nightgown standing between the trees. Then the singing stopped. The figure vanished, and their equipment turned back on all at once as if nothing had happened. When they reviewed their audio later, the singing was there, clear as day. But underneath it, they found something else. Heavy breathing, an adult's breathing, raspy and labored, as if someone or something much larger had been standing right behind them the entire time. Marcus and his team never went back. He said of the incident, "Whatever is in those woods, it's not just the spirits of children. There's something else there, something that doesn't want to be found, and we're not interested in finding it." Local historians have tried for years to debunk the Gore orphanage legend, pointing out the factual inconsistencies. But they can't explain why so many people across so many decades report the same experiences. The crying, the singing, the small handprints, the feeling of being watched by dozens of invisible eyes. The ruins were eventually torn down, but Gore Orphanage Road still remains. And people still report encounters there. Just last year, a couple's car broke down on that road at night, and while waiting for a tow truck, they recorded a video of what appears to be multiple orbs of light dancing through the trees, moving in formations that seem almost playful. Whether the orphanage existed or not, something lingers in those woods. Something that remembers. Something that wants to be remembered. If you thought our first story was unsettling, buckle up, because our second tale ventures into cryptid territory with one of Ohio's strangest and most disturbing legends, the Melonheads of Kirtland. According to local lore, somewhere in the forests of Kirtland, Ohio, near Lake County, there exists a clan of humanoid creatures with grotesquely enlarged, bulbous heads and pale, papery skin. They're said to be extremely aggressive, traveling in packs and attacking anyone who ventures too deep into their territory, especially at night. Now, the origin story of the Melonheads varies depending on who you ask, but the most common version involves a doctor who conducted experiments on children in the early 1900s. Some say it was Dr. Crow, others say Dr. Melon, which would certainly explain the name. The story goes that this doctor ran an asylum deep in the woods, and he began performing horrific experiments on the children under his care, injecting them with chemicals and exposing them to radiation in an attempt to expand their cognitive abilities. The experiments went horribly wrong, causing the children's heads to swell to enormous proportions while stunting their bodies and driving them into a feral state. According to local legend, the children eventually turned on the doctor and burned the facility to the ground. They escaped into the surrounding forest where they've lived ever since, forming a primitive society of their own. They're said to be cannibalistic, highly territorial, and possessing an almost supernatural ability to move through the woods without making a sound. Now, most folklorists dismiss this as pure urban legend, a campfire story with no basis in reality. But here's what they can't dismiss: sightings. In 1967, two high school students named Danny and Kevin were driving down Wisner Road late at night when their car stalled near the woods. While Kevin worked on the engine, Danny stood watch with a flashlight. That's when he saw them. 3 figures emerged from the tree line, moving in an odd, jerking gait. Even from a distance, Danny could see their heads were abnormally large, and they were making sounds he described as clicking and chittering like insects. The figures began moving toward them, picking up speed. Danny screamed for Kevin. They abandoned the car and ran nearly a mile down the road to the nearest house. When police returned with them to retrieve the car, it had been vandalized. Deep scratches along the doors and hood, and what appeared to be bite marks on the tires. In 1989, a woman named Patricia was driving home from a late shift at a hospital in Chardon when she struck something on the road. She got out to investigate, fearing she'd hit a deer. What she found still haunts her. A child-sized figure was lying in the road, but when she went closer to investigate, she realized it was no child. The head was massive, the limbs too thin, and the eyes reflected her headlights like it was an animal's. Before she could react, it screeched. It sounded like metal scraping against metal, and it scrambled off into the woods with an impossible speed. Patricia reported the incident to the police, but she was dismissed as having seen a deer or a coyote. But she knows what she saw. She moved out of Ohio just 6 months later. More recently, in 2015, a group of urban explorers were investigating an abandoned building near Kirtland when they claimed they were chased by 5 or 6 humanoid creatures. They managed to capture brief footage on a cell phone before fleeing. The video, which circulated on Reddit before being taken down, shows shadowy figures moving through the trees. The movement is wrong, though. Too jerky, too fast. And in 2 frames, you can clearly see what appears to be an oversized cranium reflecting the camera's light. Some researchers have tried to find a rational explanation. Perhaps the melonheads are people suffering from hydrocephalus, a condition that causes fluid buildup in the brain and can result in an enlarged head. Maybe a community of people with this condition historically lived in isolation in the woods to escape ridicule, and over time, the legend grew. But that doesn't explain the aggression, the coordinated pack behavior, the unhuman sounds, the incredible speed. A man named Earl, who grew up in Kirtland in the 1970s, said that everyone in his town knew about the melonheads, and everyone in his town knew you didn't go into certain parts of the woods after dark. But that didn't stop his older brother, who went out there on a dare when he was 17. He came back 3 hours later, his clothes torn, scratches covering his arms, and refused to talk about what happened to him. Earl's brother moved to Oregon the day after he graduated from high school and never returned to Ohio. Earl himself claims he saw them once from a distance when he was 14. He and his friends were camping near the edge of the woods. Around midnight, they heard movement in the trees, and when they shone their flashlights, they saw shapes moving between the trunks. He counted at least 7 of them, watching from the darkness. Their heads, he said, were absolutely massive, silhouetted against the moonlight. The group packed up and left immediately. People who don't live here think it's just a story, Earl said. But if you grow up in Kirtland, you learn real quick there are parts of these woods where you don't go, period. To this day, Wisner Road and the surrounding areas have a reputation. There are no streetlights, no houses nearby, just woods and darkness. And according to locals, that's exactly how the melonheads like it. Whether they're the result of medical experiments gone wrong, people suffering from a rare condition and living in isolation, or something else entirely, one thing is certain. Something inhabits those woods. Something that doesn't want to be found. And according to those who've seen them, it's probably for the best. For our final story, we're heading to southwestern Ohio to the small unincorporated community of Crosswick. If you've never heard of it, you're not alone. It's little more than a few houses and farms near the Ohio River, but in 1882, this quiet village became the center of one of Ohio's most bizarre and terrifying supernatural encounters. It was late August, and the summer heat hung heavy over the farmlands. A local farmer named James Mahoney was checking on his livestock one evening when he noticed something strange. His cattle were huddled together at the far end of the pasture, clearly agitated. That's when he saw it. According to his testimony, which was published in the Cincinnati Enquirer on August 23, 1882, the creature stood approximately 8 feet tall, covered in dark matted hair. It had elongated arms that reached nearly to the ground, and its face was horrifying, a mixture of human and beast. But here's what set this creature apart from typical Bigfoot sightings. It had wings. Not large feathered wings like a bird, but leathery bat-like appendages that extended from its shoulder blades and, according to Mahoney, spanned at least 12 feet when fully extended. The creature was hunched over one of his calves, and when it noticed Mahoney, it released an ungodly shriek, unfurled its wings, and took flight, disappearing into the gathering darkness. Mahoney ran back to his house, grabbed his rifle, and convinced a neighbor, a man named Thomas Boggs, to help him investigate. When they returned to the pasture, they found the calf slain, its throat torn open and a massive claw mark across its side. But more disturbing were the prints they found in the soft earth nearby. 3-toed tracks, each toe ending in what appeared to be a thick talon and measuring nearly a foot long. Between some of the prints, they found drag marks as if something had scraped the ground with wingtips. Word spread quickly through Crosswick and the surrounding areas. Over the next 2 weeks, at least 15 people reported seeing the creature. A woman named Sarah McCord saw it perched on her barn roof at dawn. Its wings wrapped around its body like a cloak. When she screamed, it took off, and she said the sound of its wings beating was like thunder. 2 children playing near the river claimed they saw it drinking from the water, and when it noticed them, it roared and took several bounding steps in the direction before launching itself into the air. A local preacher, Reverend Jameson, claimed the creature was a demon sent as punishment for the community's sins, and he organized nightly prayer vigils. But the most harrowing encounter came on September 3rd. A group of 5 men, including Mahoney and Boggs, decided that they had had enough. Armed with rifles and lanterns, they ventured into the woods near the river where most sightings had happened. Around 10 p.m., they heard movement in the canopy above them. Heavy breathing, the sound of something large shifting from branch to branch. Boggs raised his lantern, and there it was, clinging to a massive oak tree about 20 feet up. He later described it as having eyes that glowed with an intelligence that made his blood run cold. Before anyone could fire, the creature dropped from the tree, landing in a crouch, and charged. The men scattered, firing wildly. One man, Jacob Stern, swore one of his shots hit the creature square in the chest, but it didn't even slow it down. It pursued them for nearly a quarter mile before suddenly stopping, releasing another ear-splitting shriek and taking flight. When the sun rose the next morning, the men returned to the site. They found blood, dark, almost black, on the leaves where Jacob claimed he shot the creature. They also found more tracks and deep gouges in the tree bark where the creature had been perched. The gouges were deep, at least 2 inches deep, suggesting incredible strength. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the Crosswick monster vanished. After September 5th, there were no more sightings, no more dead livestock, nothing. It was as if the creature had simply ceased to exist. But the story doesn't end there. In 1921, nearly 40 years later, an elderly farmer found a massive skeleton in a cave along the Ohio River not far from Crosswick. The skeleton was vaguely humanoid, but far too large, with an elongated skull and an unusual bone structure extending from its shoulder blades. The farmer reported his find to the local authorities, but when officials arrived to investigate, they found the cave entrance had collapsed, burying the remains forever. Some say it was an accident. Others believe someone didn't want that skeleton examined too closely. In 1967, a teenager exploring the same stretch of river found several photographs tucked inside an old metal box hidden beneath a rock. The photographs, damaged by time and moisture, appeared to be pictures of a large winged creature in various poses, perched, in flight, and standing upright. The photos were given to a local historical society, but they were lost in a fire in 1973. Convenient, right? To this day, occasional sightings still occur in the Crosswick area. In 2008, a truck driver reported seeing something massive flying across Highway 125 late at night, its wingspan blocking out the stars. In 2016, hikers found 3-toed tracks near the river that wildlife experts couldn't identify, stating only that they didn't match any known species in Ohio. The Crosswick monster remains one of Ohio's most baffling mysteries. Was it a surviving pterosaur, somehow hidden in the Ohio wilderness? A demon, as Reverend Jameson believed? Some unknown species, perhaps, wounded and far from its natural habitat? Or was it something else entirely? Something that defies our understanding of the natural world? The people of Crosswick in 1882 knew what they saw. Their testimonies were consistent, published in newspapers, documented in personal letters and journals. These were farmers, preachers, families, practical people not given to flights of fancy. And yet, they all saw the same impossible thing. Whatever it was, it left its mark on Ohio history. And maybe, just maybe, it's still out there, waiting in the darkness along the Ohio River, watching us the same way we're trying to find it. And that's Ohio. 3 stories from the Buckeye State that don't often get told outside of the communities where they happened. Gore Orphanage, where you might still hear children crying in the night. The Melonheads of Kirtland, lurking in the forest with their impossible anatomy. And the Crosswick Monster, a winged terror that defied explanation and then vanished into legend. These are the stories that make up the supernatural fabric of America. Encounters that can't be explained away, no matter how hard skeptics try. Witnesses who stake their reputations on what they saw. Evidence that raises more questions than it answers. Next episode, we're heading to another state with its own dark secrets. I won't give away which one yet, but I promise you, the stories only get stranger from here. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our journey through all 50 states. Drop a comment below and let me know if you've ever experienced something supernatural. Do you have a story from your state that you think I should cover? I read every comment and your story might just make it into a future episode. Until next time, keep the lights on, keep your eyes open, and remember, folklore is just history that couldn't be explained. Thanks for watching.